Hello everyone and welcome to my newest video. So today I want to talk about how the artifact system is actually not as bad as everyone makes it out to be. So today we're just going to start off with a few little disclaimers. Then I want to go over why I'm actually doing this, how the artifacts actually work, what kind of build I considered for my characters when I did the calculations, the odds of getting what I would consider broken artifacts, it's not quite perfect, but it's basically up there. After that, we're going to talk about the odds of getting an acceptable artifact, or I would just say like a usable artifact. And then we're just going to wrap things up. To start off, I'm going to start with two little disclaimers. So the first one is going to be, so for the acceptable artifacts part of this video, I'll be taking odds I saw on the IWinToLose's video about the sanctifying elixirs. Because I'll show this a little later, but due to the way they're actually calculating it, the way I'm doing it at least, it would take like 500 lines of calculations, which I'm not going to spend 5 hours doing. I'm sure there's like an easy way to do it. But I haven't really figured it out. So I'm still going to go with these calculations. Also, the second one is some calculations may be a little bit off. I did my best to like try to make it so that it's all correct. But some might not be quite all right. I mean, obviously, if you have anything to say, do say so in the comments. I'll be obviously reading them. So the reason I'm doing this is because I see a lot of people online, and I'm sure everyone else sees a lot of people say that, saying just how awful and terrible it is, when really I really don't think it's that bad. Like I definitely agree that it could be better. 100%. I mean, we could just have guaranteed best pieces of all time every run. I think that would not be too good for the game, but I mean, that's just my opinion. So the goal of this video is not like to make you think it's an amazing system. It's just to say, yeah, it's not perfect, but it's definitely not as bad as people say. So the next part is going to be about how artifacts actually work. So if you already know, just skip. I'm probably just going to put timestamps. Um, but yeah, I'm basically just going to explain a little bit how it actually works. So let's begin with the main stats. So as I'm sure most of you know, each artifact has a pool of main stats it can actually choose from. Some are, for example, the flower. You're guaranteed to have HP, flat HP. When on the other hand, for example, a goblet, which I think is one of the big problem, I guess, that people have with this, is because of how unlikely it is to get like a specific elemental damage bonus piece. So as we can see on this table right here, for example, for goblets, we have a 20% chance, basically 20% chance to get HP, attack, defense, and then we have 5% chance to get each individual damage bonus and 2.5% EM. So yeah, basically every single artifact has this. Sands, it's a little smaller pool, which is why it's a little bit easier to get, and then circlets as well. So that basically, whenever you drop any of these artifacts, for example, a goblet, it has a 5% chance of having a main stat that's pyro damage bonus, basically. Main stats also can't be in substats. So for a feather, which has attack, basically flat attack, as the only possible main stat, it's never going to show as a substat. So you can look over every single feather you have. Not a single one should have flat attack. So that's about it for main stats. As you can see, it wasn't too complicated. Substats, though, are a little bit more complicated. So each substat has a specific weight that is assigned to it, as we can see on this table. So for example, if we take HP, well, flat HP, its weight is 6. So the way it's calculated is basically the weight of that specific substat that you want. For example, here we're going to take flat HP on the weight of the total available substats. So for example, if we have a 5-star feather that has already attack percent, ER, and EM as its base 3 lines, the odds of rolling, for example, crit damage as the final substat is going to be the weight of crit damage, which is 3, divided by the weight of every single available substat. So in this case, it would be flat HP, flat defense, HP percent, defense percent, and crit rate and crit damage, as you can see. So 6 plus 6 plus 4 plus 4 plus 3 plus 3, which is a 3 out of 26. So if we have this theoretical feather, the odds of rolling crit damage as a final line is 3 on 26. So this is why it can be obnoxiously long to calculate the odds, because I would have to count every single possible combination that I can do. So for example, if it rolls crit damage as the first roll, it doesn't have the same effect as if I were to roll, for example, attack. Because if I roll attack, its weight is 6, whereas if I roll crit rate or crit damage, whatever, its weight is 3, so it removes more or less from the denominator. So for example, for a theoretical perfect feather, so if we have like we drop a feather, it has crit rate, crit damage, ER, attack percent, for example. I still need to calculate 6 different orders because it could roll ER first, but it could also roll crit rate first, and then the second one could be something different, which is completely just making the calculations very obnoxious. So onto the build that I considered. So every perfect piece is going to have double crit, energy recharge, and one of the following: attack percent, HP percent, or EM, which I'm going to note AHE just for it to be a little bit simpler. And when I'm adding energy recharge to that, it's going to be AHEE. So I chose those substats because each DPS character tends to usually like these subs. Obviously, most supports wouldn't want double crit, but I think that people are a lot more lenient when it comes to building their support characters, as it's not the damage that they're gonna be judging. Also, some of them just don't really need amazing artifacts. So, for example, Shalonen, right? The entirety of her buffs and debuffs come from her artifact set and her E talent level. If you have her weapon, there's a little part of it that comes from her defense, from the weapon passive. But if you don't, the only thing that she gains from substats are better availability for her burst through ER. And then if you get some defense percent, you get more healing on the burst and more damage if you go in a triple Geo team. So let's get into the odds. Let's first of all set some conditions for it to be considered, let's say, a perfect artifact. It's obviously not going to be perfect, but it's going to be perfect enough to where it's still going to be broken. So first of all, it needs to start as a 4-liner, so it must have 4 substats at +0. These substats must be crit rate, crit damage, ER, and any of the AHE substats. So for artifact pieces that can't have substats from the ones I listed, for example, the circlet, which we're going to want crit rate or crit damage as the main stat, so we can have it in the substats. I'm going to consider that we want to miss 0 roll on the 3 left available. So for example, a circlet, right? We'd have crit main, crit, ER, and then an AHE. All right, so I'll spare you most of the calculations because they were like very extensive and annoying, especially I didn't go like into the ones that would be really annoying. So here, for example, I have the circlet calculations pulled up. So this basically lists out every possible combination of order for artifacts that popped up. And then here we have the drop rate of a crit main stat. Each of them is a 10% chance. So if we just add them and we just consider that we don't really care which one it is, so that gives us 0.2. Then we have a 0.1, which is 0.1 is basically the odd of getting a circlet in any domain run. If we count the fact that we only care about one of the 2 circlets. So like, for example, if you're an emblem, you would want a circlet from the emblem domain and not the Shimenawa set. And then this one is the odd of being a 4-liner. So as you can see, it can get pretty complicated. Obviously, I might have made some I'm pretty sure I didn't, but if I did, just hit me up on Discord. Honestly, my user is going to be in the description. I would gladly, talk about it. So the main stats were rather straightforward to calculate. As I only had to multiply the final odd of getting a good substat with the odd of getting the right main stat, as I explained earlier. So for goblets, I considered that any elemental damage bonus was good, because you're able to use it as an offset. I also made calculations when it comes to alright artifact or like usable artifact. So I considered if you're going for only one specific element. So since we have 7 elements, and we have a basically 5% chance of dropping any of them, it was a simple 35% to calculate. And for sands, I considered that either HP or attack percent or EM was good. I separated EM from attack and HP percent because it has a different odd of dropping at 10% as opposed to 26.66%. And for the circlet, as I already said, I consider either crit rate or crit damage. So considering artifacts, like 5-star artifacts have a 1.07 drop rate on any 20 resin run, and that we get 180 resin per day, it would come back basically if we just add all of these odds of getting a final product, as I call it, um, it would basically come to about 2,000, sorry, 2,333.9 days per piece. That is if ER, you don't really mind like rolling in ER as like whenever you want. So here I consider just the base ER roll. Basically, we're not going to roll again into ER. So that would come back to 5,527 days, which is obviously pretty obnoxious. I'm sure everyone agrees. If the only good artifacts you could get were from these artifacts, it would obviously be awful. But that's not the case. Also, that's not even taking into account the high and low roll possibilities. So if we consider only high rolls, let's say high rolls are the two upper ones, as you can see from the table here. Each 5-star has 4 different values of substats it can choose from. And if we consider only the top one, that would basically reduce our odds of getting really good artifacts by 0.5 to the power of 5, which is basically you have to multiply your odd of getting any specific artifact by 0.00315. So that basically comes back to 74,500 days only to get one artifact. So obviously, that is not good, right? I think we all agree that is absolutely awful. But I mean, that's why I think expectations need to be lower than that. So now onto the acceptable artifact, which I think is a bit more suited in order to judge the actual artifact system, since those are the ones you're going to get, and they're actually not like awful. So for the stats, as I already mentioned, I'm going to be using IWinToLose's stats that he showed in his video about Sanctifying Elixir. The link to the video will be in the description, obviously. In his video, he gave like some really useful stats on the odds of getting double crit artifact alongside some other things. So I'm not sure whether he considered both 4-liners and 3-liners, or just one of the two. So what I'm gonna presume is that he only went for 3-liners since they're the most likely, and that's gonna make them basically more representative of what we actually have. So I'll also only consider rolls that go into crit, since I can't know for sure if it has an AHE substat. And if I consider that it does when it doesn't, the odds of rolling into something good is 3/4, as opposed to only 1/2. Which obviously, if I consider it 3/4, that would make the odds completely skyrocket, and I mean that's not what we want. The only one that I'll consider with an AHE roll will be the circlet because these stats were available in his video. So these presumption will allow me to lowball the odds as much as possible. So that means every odd presented in this part of the video should be somewhat lower than like the actual average. So what that means is that every number of day that I'm showing should be a little bit higher than normal. So my standards for these artifacts. So as I already said, we're gonna go for 3-liner, double crit, there's going to be a maximum of 1 roll from the 4 that we have that is going to be allowed to be missed. And I will not be considering high or low rolls. I could, but on a usable artifact, I mean, if you roll 2.7 crit rate, yeah, it's rough, but it's still a crit rate roll. As we can see, these are much more viable expectations with a much lower average of days per piece. If we add these odds right here together, we get a chance of getting a final product of about 0.79%, which comes back to about 13 days per piece. And if we consider that we don't want to miss any rolls, it comes back to about 65 days per piece. Now, if we just look at the raw stats right here, we can see pretty obviously that from the artifacts that we're going to be getting every about 13 days, there's going to be a lot more flowers and feathers since we can expect a piece every 35 days as opposed to 141 at its lowest. But considering that we can have up to 1 off piece on any build that we have, and that this off piece is usually going to be either a circlet or a goblet, we can calculate the odds of getting either. So when you calculate these odds, it comes back to about 1 piece every 240 days, which, I mean, it's not that bad. On top of that, since now we're able to craft pieces, that means that as soon as you get 3 good pieces on a set, you can just straight up go to the artifact transmuter and you can just get your last piece. Obviously, it's not guaranteed, but it has a very, like, you're basically removing entirely the odds of dropping it which are much lower. As we can see, the odds of actually dropping an artifact with double crit is always under 1%, whereas the rolls, on the other hand, have either 31.25% or 6.64%, which is much higher. So if we were guaranteed a double crit piece, the odds of getting a final product is just this column right here, as opposed to the product of these two. For example, if we check the odds of getting a final product on a goblet with any specific elemental damage bonus, for example, pyro damage bonus, the odd of getting that final product goes from 0.01% to 31.25%, which is almost 3,000 times more. So to wrap things up, I think it's pretty clear that if your expectations are in check, artifact farming isn't really that bad. I think a lot of people just like go into every single day, every single artifact that they are getting with the impression that they'll drop something outstanding or, well, usable. When really, I mean, that's not really how it works in this game. Like in order to get good artifact, you usually need to put a lot of time, resin, even just to get like one okay piece. When you start farming like for a new character or just, well, start farming artifacts altogether, your standards shouldn't be really high. I mean, I think you should be okay with pretty much any piece that you're dropping, since you're basically building from nothing. So it's only as you advance through your builds that your standards should get higher. The obscenely low chance of dropping like amazing artifacts is also why farming efficient domains such as Marechaussee Hunter, Emblem, or Obsidian is, well, so recommended. They allow to build for multiple characters at the same time and allows every single piece, no matter the set, to be possibly useful, effectively doubling your chances of getting a good artifact. Universal sets also allow for multiple main and substats to be useful, increasing your odds of getting something good even further. For example, in Golden Troops case, every single Sans main stat is useful besides EM, and even then I think you could argue that you can always use it as an off piece since it's so much harder than normal Sans. As we see here, in order to get an acceptable EM Sans, it would take about 400 days of farming, as opposed to the 150 that we have for attack and HP percent Sans. Basically, it's over twice likelier to get an attack or HP percent Sans than it is to get an EM Sans. So on that set, you could build Farina with either HP percent or ER. You could build Fischl or Yaimiko with attack percent, and you can also build Albedo or Chiori with defense percent. All right, well, that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I also hope that I was able to change your mind a little bit about Genshin's artifact system. Drop your thoughts in the comment down below. And if you wish to discuss anything, add me on Discord. I'm always open to chat about that. Again, my goal wasn't to make you love the artifact system beyond your own imagination and just be completely overthrown by joy when you think about the drop rates. But it was mostly just to explain how it's nowhere near as bad as I feel like people are portraying it to be. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it this far, consider liking and subscribing. It would help a ton. And I'll see you guys in the next one.